warm as it is in Israel right now.
No, actually, I think it is. I heard it was like really hot in Toronto. So yeah,
It's
it's
actually
about 30 degrees here.
okay. Oh, geez. All right, so they moved all my files. Let me just look for the file. Sort. Uh, Sort by name.
You just have to click the top on the column, the name, and the sort by this.
Yeah. Here we go. I'm sorry for the delay, Rabbi Sai. They installed this Microsoft OneDrive and moved all of our files over to there. And so created a big disruption that I'm not happy about, but such is progress. Okay, so why don't we get started? Okay, so let me just, okay. What page were we on, Barry? Thank you. Okay. Okay, we were learning about when you find a coin, some coins in the slot of the vending machine, you get to keep it. The next question was, what do you do when the majority of the people are not Jewish, but the building itself is Jewish? So he says, you go according to the passersby in that particular area. Next Shayla, Mishamat Saveda Kishain Efsharis Lavalam Lahatzila. If you find a lost item where it's impossible for the owner to ever retrieve that item, and the example that the Gemara gives is called Zuto Shel Yam, which means if it falls into the depths of the ocean. Kagon Shashatvo Nahar Esachefetz, or a river washes up the object. Mahadin Shahamotse Amad V'Hitzil Et HaChefetz HaOved Kishabe'alim Omed V'Tzoveach She'eino Mityaesh Me'ota Aveda. Normally, the Gemara says that a person who loses an item that is swept away by a river or that falls into the ocean, the person usually has ziyeush, gives up hope. But what if the owner says, I have not given up hope? I'm definitely going to get that item back. Ha'im alav lahazir leba'alim. Do you have an obligation to return it to the owner? Okevin she'ein be'efsharuto shel ha'be'alim lahatzilat aveito zacha bo hamotze. Or could you argue that since there was no way for you to ever retrieve it, barring a miracle, let's say, there was no way for you to ever retrieve it, any normal person would have had yeush, and therefore you're not entitled to the object. So the answer that he gives is based on the poskim. Kol davar sha'avad miba'alav ve'ein efshar lahatzilo. If there was no way to retrieve that item, kagon sheshataf nahar la'oto chayvetz, or shalakha chayat torefet v'chol kayotze bazeh. So let's say the river washed it away, or a wild animal runs off with it. Did you hear about this case? This a woman posted on this WhatsApp group from woman that her little dog was
Fight. She kicked the
she ran after the coyote. The coyote grabbed her dog, her little fluffy dog, and the dog's in bad shape. But okay, in other words, like these things happen. Velo nitan lahatzil, and under normal conditions, it would be impossible to ever retrieve it. Harezu aveda sha'avuda mikol adam. This is what's called an item that is lost from all humanity. In other words, no one has the ability to have access to it at the moment when it was washed away by the river, even though eventually it washed up. But during the time that it was lost to everyone, not just lost to the owner. And therefore, if a person is somehow able to retrieve it, even though it has a siman, and even though the owner says, "Hey, that's mine. I was never miyash." So the Gemara says the person who finds it is still allowed to keep it. If, however, there was any possibility for the person who lost it to retrieve it, so then the person would be obligated to give it to the finder. All right, so let's say I'm just thinking of, you throw something into the Niagara Falls, right? So there's no way you would ever hope of ever retrieving it. Kid loses his baseball cap in Niagara Falls. So normally there's no way that you're never going to retrieve that. Somehow, by some miracle, you come back 3 months later, and lo and behold, it's caught in a trap in one of the waterworks over there. So that's a miraculous recovery. If a person were to find that, he would have no obligation to return it, even if the owner says, "Hey, that belongs to my
It
kid."
is on the mate of the.
Yeah,
You have the case of the Harley Davidson from Japan, tsunami, that the guy used to park his Harley Davidson in a container. And with the tsunami was away and ended in the States. So they found the container floating in the ocean with a motorcycle inside, and he recovered it. And Harley Davidson paid for the repairs and sent it back to the owner in Japan.
no kidding.
Wow.
Because it was a unique case. So for them was good publicity, even they survived the tsunami and they lost nothing.
Wow.
The Harley that survived the tsunami.
Yeah.
Okay.
And traveler knows came all
Yeah.
the way to a very
Wow.
but one gas tank.
Without any extra kilometers on their belt.
So if a person says stubborn, I'll never give up finance unconditionally. That's not a basis.
That's not a basis, because if something, the Gemara says, if something is totally lost from all humanity temporarily, it belongs to no one at that point.
Does not have the age, that's still.
Yeah, even though he doesn't have Yesh, yeah. We say batal daito eitzel kol adam. We say that his thoughts are null because the normal human being would be miyash. Vim haba'olim lo hayu bizman ha'aveda. But let's say the owner was not aware that it was lost. The only exception is if it's Yeir Shalom Midas. The owner is not aware that the river swept it away. Then if a guy baseball cap, you didn't realize it was swept away by the river? I had no idea. So then you have to give it back to him. Okay. Because that's the Yeir Shalom Midas, which is an interesting exception. Okay. Next. She'ela. Mahadin kishenofim kol minei chafatzim kemon magavot sa'atzuim lachatzero o lemir pasto shedarim me'alav. So what would be the halacha? You live in an apartment building, and all different kinds of things end up on your mirpeset, okay, or on your garden. So, or if you live in a house, let's say kids, who are neighbors play ball, and the ball gets kicked over to your backyard, or a towel gets blown away from your friend's clothesline onto your property. Ubarer lo shekvar hisyashu me'osam hadvarim shanaflu lirashuso. And it's clear that the owner has already had yeush from those items, because maybe they're items of little value, or it's been a long time since it's been in your backyard. Ha'im zacha bahem o yesh lo levarer me'iza mehashchenim naflu v'yesh lo lahachazira. Can you keep them, or do you have to try to find out which neighbor this came from and try to return it to them? So the answer is tshuva kol mine chafatzim shenoflim lachatzera or lemirpeset mishchenav adarim me'alav. Any kind of object that falls into your yard, or onto your mirpeset from neighbors that live above you, chayev lahashiv leba'alim afim nisyashu habalim achar kach. You still have to return them. Those you have to return. And the reason is, what's the reason? What is going on here? What was that ding? This new system is okay. Oh, these are just reminders. Dismiss all. Okay. Kevin shebizman nefilatan l'rshuso, he's chayiv b'hashava, because once they fell into your property, you immediately became obligated to return them, even if they've been on your property for a long time. V'lachein afilu im naflu kol minei chafatzim she'ein bahem simin, chayiv lahashiv lahem. Therefore, even if the item doesn't even have a simin, you have to return it. You have to do whatever you can to try and return it. And the reason is because it may have come onto your property before the owner even had yeush. And once it falls onto your property, bless you, then you have an obligation to try to notify the neighbors and to figure out who it belongs to. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. She'ela. Mi shematza avedat chavero. Uva'oto hazman nimsa gam kein avedato. So now the question is, whose lost item takes priority, yours or your friend's? So let's say you find your friend's lost object, and you also discover that your own lost object was found. Mahadin kishein chashash sheyovadet avedato. Ha'im chayav l'tafelu lahagazir avedat chavero kodem la'avedato. O kodem yesh lo l'tapel ba'avedato v'rak achar kach ba'avedat chavero. So you have to try so you have two lost items, and I guess you have an option. I'm not sure what the scenario is. You have an option of taking care of your lost item or your friend's lost item.
You only do one.
Well, it seems like it's not that you can only do one, but it's a question of which one must you do first? Must you take care of your lost item first, or must you take care of your neighbor's lost item first, or are you allowed to take care of your lost item first? So let's see this scenario. He says, Misha matza avedat chavero uvotozman pagab gamkein ba'avedato. She'im yitafel b'shel chavero u alul lahafsidat avedato. O sha'ar hefsid mamon she'yagilo al yedei hitasku to ba'ashavat aveda. In other words, what we're dealing with is a situation where, by dealing with my friend's lost item, I may end up losing mine. So normally we say that a person who stands to lose money does not have to lose money in order to deal with his friend's lost item. But nevertheless, the poskim say, Yesh lo la'adam lihikanes lifnim mishuras adin Shelo yidaktek lomar shali kodem. But the poskim say that in this area you should try to go above the letter of the law, and don't say that technically my financial interests take priority. Rak imbar lo sheyehefsed b'shelo kishit asek b'avedat chera. It's only if it's absolutely certain that you will incur a loss when dealing with your friend's lost item. So, for example, if you have a very important appointment, and by missing the appointment, you're going to miss being able to close a deal, so then you don't have to deal with a lost item of your friend. Or let's say by dealing with your friend's lost item, you'll be late for work and you're going to lose money or you're going to get in trouble with your employer. Then you don't have an obligation. But if it's only a question that there's a possibility that you may end up losing money, then you're not, even though technically you're not obligated, but you should try to go lifnim mishur sadin anytime it's not certain that you're going to lose money. Let me just see what he's quoting from here. He quotes from the Sma that שבכל דבר של הצלת ממון, חבר יכול אדם תמיד למצוא צד התר שעלול להפסיד חובו. A person could always make an argument to himself. Hey, you know what? If I engage in dealing with this person's lost item, I'm going to lose out on X. So a person could always rationalize why he's not obligated. I'm going to be late for wherever I'm going to, whatever. Or I'm going to not be able to take care of this, which may make me profit. So, and the Shulchan Aruch writes, so the Shulchan Aruch writes the following language. It says, you could always find a reason why not to engage in chesed. Because my wife needs me, or my kids need me, or my work needs me, and you'll end up never doing chesed for other people. Because there's always an excuse that you can make as to why this is going to end up costing me, right? So if a person were to take that attitude, especially in a busy world that we live in, you'll never end up doing chesed for other people, which I think is a very important argument that we need to sort of flesh out a little bit. So where is this brought down? Choshen Mishpat Siman Reish Samech Dalid Seif Aleph. Let's see. Yeah, Porek Mimenu. Here, let's take a look if I can find this. Why is it taking so long? My whole computer is slowed down by this new system, which is a bummer.
Where are your files?
They were, they moved everything to this OneDrive, Microsoft
Are
OneDrive.
your files on here? Or they're on the cloud?
Yeah, no, they're not on the cloud. They're not in the cloud. It's just that they are local, but everything is backed up to the cloud. And so everything's linked now. Just give me a second. I'm just bringing up the Bar Ilan CD. Okay, we want to look at the Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat. Let's take a look. Here it is, Reish Samech Daled Sif Aleph. Here's the language of the Shulchan Aruch, and I'll share the screen. Misha avdalo aveda upaga ba'avedato uvavedat chavero. You lost your own item, and you happen to encounter your own lost item and your friend's lost item. So if you can retrieve both and make yourself whole and your friend whole, you have to do both. V'im lo yachzer et shalo, sha'avedato kodemet afilu la'avedat aviv rabo. And if not, you can retrieve yours first, because your lost item takes priority even over your father's or your Rebbe's lost item. We know that when it's your Rebbe or your father, their lost item takes priority over others' lost items, except yours. Yours comes first. Kidarshinan me'efes lo yihiya b'cha evyan. And this is derived from the pasuk that it says, efes ki lo yihiya b'cha evyan, right? And the Sma writes that the Torah says, Hi zahir min ha'anius. You're not allowed to impoverish yourself in the course of doing mitzvahs. You're not allowed to impoverish yourself in the course of helping other people. Anytime you stand to lose money by engaging in hashavas aveda, you have to put aside the mitzvah in order to protect your assets. Va'afal pichein, yesh lo la'adam likanes lifnim mishuras hadin. But nonetheless, a person should try and go above and beyond the letter of the law, and velo yidaktek velomar, and not to be so punctilious and pedantic to say shali kodem. Mine always comes first. In lo behefsed muchach, unless there's a clear and present danger of you losing real money. V'im tamid medaktek, and if a person would always be exacting in this area, porek mimenu ol gemilut chasadim. He's casting off the yoke of doing chesed for other people. V'sof sheyitzarech labriot, and he'll eventually will become poor and need other people's support. And let's see. Shon hamor val b'fumidin shi dikduk aniut. There's the Sma quotes this phrase. He says, "Diktuk aniut," that being pedantic brings to poverty. You have to learn not to be so pedantic, because if you're always going to be exacting in making sure that you don't lose money, then you're going to lose lots of money. Is essentially what the lesson of this all is. Let's see. Okay. All right, that's an important lesson in and of itself. Okay, so let's now go on to the next piece. Okay. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Next Shayla. Misha matza matbeot kesef mefuzarim umiktzatan munachim ze al gav ze. So a person finds a bunch of coins. Some of them are stacked and some of them are not, meaning that it's not clear whether they were dropped deliberately, they were put down deliberately, or whether they dropped out of someone's pocket and the person may not even be aware. What are the ramifications? Was there yesh or not? Ha'im yesh litlos shehunchu midat ve'eno zocha bahem im not lam v'yesh lo lahachriz aleim o ein ze derech chinuach v'zacha bahem hamotzei. So you find coins. They're a bit scattered, but they're a little bit stacked also. It's unclear to you whether they were placed there or whether they fell out of someone's pocket. Now, do you have an obligation to try and return them because they may have been put down there deliberately? Or can you say, no, they fell out, a person feels that they're lost, it seems that they've been here for quite some time, and therefore the owner was miyash and I'm allowed to keep them. If you find scattered coins or bills, so he says, if even though some of them may seem to have been stacked that way, you're still allowed to keep it, because if a person really wanted them to be put down there deliberately, he would have been more meticulous. But if it's clear that they were put down there deliberately, you're not allowed to use that money. Ella yeshlo lahachriz, but you should make an announcement. And if you can't find the owner, put them in a protected area until you get ha'aveda shematzah. And if you have that amount of money in your own bank account, mutilo li'ishtamesh ba'oso kesef, you can use that money. Because you could always replace that money with another person who with other money, as long as the person provides a valid siman of how many coins there were, where it was placed, and so forth. V'mniknav onevad bizman hashimush bekesef chayv b'tashlumin. If the money that you're watching for a person gets lost while you're watching it, so that you can return it to him, then you have to you're a shomer sachar, and you're chayiv for gneva v'aveda, because you're getting the schar. Remember, we learned that a person who's watching over an aveda, in a sense, is being rewarded in not having to take care of other mitzvot. And similarly, and we've learned this before, if you find food pulled onto them too long, they will spoil. Evaluate their value and write down their value, and you can use them and consume them. Because if you don't consume them and you're going to wait for the owner, they're going to end up getting spoiled. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. Great day.